To a brand new hour of National Report. Thanks for joining us. I'm Emma Reckenberg.
And I'm Sean Kreisman.
It is a busy news day today. We wanted to get you caught up on this story. Maybe you saw it. It has to do with Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, now being accused of failing to report millions of dollars worth of lavish gifts.
It is a ProPublica report saying Justice Thomas did not report more than 20 years worth of luxury vacations, private jet flights, and cruises on a private yacht, all courtesy of a major Republican donor named Harlan Crow. But Thomas is saying he's done nothing wrong, and many defending him are pointing to similar gifts that were accepted by those on the opposite side of the political spectrum.
Joining us today and this hour is Dennis Neal. He'll be with us in studio. He's a media strategist, host of the podcast What's Bugging Me on Ricochet. Also with us, Mark Paoletta is an attorney who worked on the confirmation of Justice Thomas and author of the book Created Equal. Welcome, everyone. So glad we're able to spend this time together. Mark, if I could actually start with you, just your initial reaction to the ProPublica report and the response from Clarence Thomas.
Sure. The ProPublica report is just another cherry-picked sort of narrative that tries to attack Justice Thomas. They've been going after Justice Thomas for 40 years, 30 years on the Supreme Court. They don't like his rulings, and they're trying to smear him. The ProPublica piece tries to represent that it's very clear that Justice Thomas should have reported these gifts, but that's absolutely wrong. The language of the rule says that these are not reportable. Personal hospitality is not reportable. And the New York Times and NBC and a number of other publications have pointed to recent rule changes on this very topic, on this very issue, that now say they will be required to. So it's very clear, and there's legal experts like Stephen Gillers, who's probably the most cited legal ethics expert, saying that this was a plausible interpretation, and that going forward with these new changes, the justices will now need to report this type of travel and these types of gifts. But that's very clear that the current rule that has been in place for many years, Justice Thomas was complying with it.
So I'll go into the report to get a little bit more specifics on it for those that may not have seen it. The report says Thomas, quote, vacation on Crow's super yacht around the globe in his $5,000 jet. It goes on to say he vacationed about every summer at Crow's private resort in the Adirondacks. It also mentions a $19,000 Bible that belonged to Frederick Douglass. But the report says Justice Thomas did disclose that. I think a lot of folks want to know, who is Harlan Crow? Do you have any ideas on that?
Sure. Harlan Crow's a good friend of mine. He's a great American. He's a wonderful person. Anyone who knows Harlan and any sort of, that somehow he was seeking favors is absolutely absurd. He's a personal friend, a close personal friend of the Thomases. He has one of the greatest collections of American documents in a library down in Dallas. So he's just a great guy. He's a businessman, and he's a good person. They're smearing him as they've smeared so many of Justice Thomas's friends over the years. And that's what's kind of despicable about these kinds of attacks. You mentioned that there are other justices that travel and accept gifts. They disclose some of them. This is a personal hospitality rule where you're not required to. And Justice Thomas, early in his tenure, consulted with Supreme Court justices, consulted with lower court colleagues, consulted with the Federal Judicial Center, who advised him that he was not required to actually disclose these sorts of gifts that's based on the personal hospitality rules. So again, this is just a smear of Justice Thomas. They've been trying to smear him for 40 years, and it's not going to change him in any way.
The media reaction has been strong, and before we get to Dennis, I just wanted to play the sound bite, and then we'll provide some reaction for it. Here's the sound.
The Supreme Court is in the middle of this swirling controversy, and it causes trouble for Clarence Thomas.
It's meticulous reporting, though. You know, ProPublica, Kira, it's a very distinguished news outlet, and these trips that you talked about have been going on allegedly for more than 20 years.
Some really eye-opening numbers if you look at the ProPublica report.
Dennis?
Man, you know, you just heard Mark Paoletta give an incredible counterpunch to the ProPublica report. All those points that he made. Did any of those show up in the ProPublica report at all? No. Also, is ProPublica an incredibly liberal media outlet? Is it now going to do investigations of all the other Supreme Court justices? Is it going to look at how Elizabeth Warren, a senator making a couple $100,000 a year, I saw on Twitter the other day, supposedly a net worth of $67 million? Let's investigate that. I mean, if this were about a judge on the court of color who was a liberal and a conservative outlet did it, they would call this racist. Is ProPublica now doing a racist story on Clarence Thomas and going after him because he's black? No, they're going after him because he's conservative. Where is the story here? The guy had a friend. The friend has more money than the judge has, so the friend paid for stuff when they went out. We all have done this either for our friends or let our friends pay. I just think that this is totally a hit job. They're hoping to push him out. And the great thing is, Clarence Thomas is fearless. He's been through the worst of this. There's no way he stepped aside for anything like this, especially when it's not even against the rules. What happened to us? What happened to the media? It's just a shame.
Mark, it was brought up here by Dennis about Senator Elizabeth Warren. I believe we even have photos of the senator flying on private jets that do not belong to her. President Obama flying on their friends' private jets that do not belong to them. Here's the video of exactly what we're talking about. There's Senator Warren getting off of there. That is not her jet. Is there a double standard here, Mark?
Yeah, it's an even bigger double standard than people realize. The Congress is the only branch of government that doesn't have any conflict of interest laws that apply to them, right? The judges have 28 U.S.C. 455, which is the recusal law if you have, a financial interest in a case before you. In the executive branch, it's 208, 18 U.S.C. 208, which is a criminal provision. Congress has literally exempted themselves from any conflict of interest. So you could have a senator or a congressman who has a spouse, who has a client, and that member can work on those matters, never have to disclose it. And in fact, the ethics manual in the House says that you can vote on matters that significantly affect your financial interest. So that's the dirty secret here, is that Congress actually has no requirements with respect to conflict of interest. Congress doesn't have any record-keeping requirements. Members of Congress, senators, own the papers that are created up in Congress, that their staff create, that they create. There's no record-keeping, there's no FOIA, there's no accountability up in Congress. But they want to go after the Supreme Court. And as you said, it's really just focused on Justice Thomas in particular. When Justice Jackson had her investiture ceremony, there was a number of companies and individuals that paid for a party to celebrate her investiture at the Library of Congress with bands and all sorts of things. And nobody has any interest in figuring out who paid for that. So it all runs one way. It all runs particularly towards Justice Thomas. And we saw them go after his wife last year, right? And what happened after a whole year of smearing her and leaking things? She wasn't mentioned in the report at all. An 800-plus page report run by the Democrats didn't mention Ginny Thomas once. So this is the kind of garbage that Thomases go through for years and years and years, and there's a double standard that's with a blinking light on it.
And you wrote the book on the justice there, Created Equal. Mark Paoletta, appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts with our viewing audience. Mark, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care.